What Johnny Depp never said about Vanessa Paradis, until now, was always told under the soft glow of a beautiful love story. But behind that light was a truth Johnny Depp hid for 2 decades. He has only now admitted it, a confession strong enough to overturn every story told before and shake the perfect image they once shared. And that truth began in a moment no one ever saw. Vanessa Paradis stepped into fame long before she understood what fame could take from a person. She looked calm on stage, almost weightless, as if pressure never touched her skin. France saw a young girl who sang with a soft voice and carried herself with a grace that felt older than her age. People called her mysterious, fragile, distant, in a beautiful way. They thought the silence around her was a charm, not a shield. Success came fast, too fast for someone who preferred quiet rooms and slow mornings. Joe La Taxi made her a national symbol overnight. Cameras followed her before she learned how to walk away from them. She grew up while the entire country watched, not understanding that not all attention is a gift. She learned early that fame is a contract. You offer your face, and they take your peace. But Vanessa never fought back loudly. She protected herself, the only way she knew. She stayed calm. She spoke little. She let the noise move around her, without letting it inside. The press saw this as elegance. Only a few understood it was survival. That silence was not weakness, it was discipline. It was the only tool she had to stay whole. Her beauty made things harder. It was the kind that looked effortless, the kind that made people assume her life must be effortless too. She walked through airports with barely a word, and people wrote entire stories based on how she held her coat. Every gesture became a headline. Every quiet moment became a rumor. And still, she kept her voice low, as if raising it would break something important inside her. She never chased the spotlight, it chased her. She carried it with a strange mix of distance and duty. She knew the industry loved young women who looked delicate but demanded strength from them every day. She learned to stay composed when others would have collapsed. She learned to disappear without ever leaving. To smile without giving anything away. This control became her signature. It made her unshakable in a world built on chaos. When directors demanded emotion, she delivered it with precision. When journalists searched for scandal, she gave them fog. When fans wanted intimacy, she offered presence instead. She understood the difference between being seen and being known. She allowed the first. She protected herself from the second. To the public, Vanessa was the woman who never broke, the woman who could stand beside storms and look untouched, the woman whose silence felt like elegance, not pain. They never imagined how much weight that silence carried. They never imagined how much she kept inside just to maintain that calm surface. And when she finally stood next to Johnny Depp, the world believed they were seeing a perfect balance. A quiet woman and a wild man. Light and shadow, stability and fire. But the truth was different. Her silence was armor. His silence was distance. And the gap between those two things would change both of them forever. They met on a night that looked ordinary from the outside. Paris was quiet. The air was cold. Nothing suggested that two lives were about to collide. In a way neither of them could escape. Vanessa walked into a small gathering, the kind she usually avoided. Johnny was there, surrounded by people but already drifting away from them. He looked restless, like someone running from his own thoughts. Their eyes met before anyone introduced them. It was quick, almost accidental, but it changed the atmosphere in the room. Johnny saw someone who didn't demand anything from him. Vanessa saw someone who lived louder than she ever allowed herself to. They didn't move toward each other at first. They just watched, like two people recognizing a storm without knowing on which side they stood. But when they finally spoke, the conversation was simple. No grand confession, no dramatic moment. Just two people speaking softly, while the noise around them faded. Johnny seemed surprised by how calm she was. Vanessa seemed surprised by how tired he looked behind the charm. He laughed in a way that felt like relief. She listened in a way that felt like safety. Neither of them named it, but they felt it. The pull between them wasn't loud, it was steady. Johnny followed her outside to smoke. She stood beside him, without saying much. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt like an agreement. Like they both knew something had already begun. He looked at her as if she understood a part of him he didn't show to anyone. She looked at him as if she saw the broken edges under the persona everyone else admired. People at the gathering noticed. They whispered about the chemistry. They assumed it was just a Hollywood spark, the kind that burns fast and disappears. But this was different. Johnny leaned closer when she talked. Vanessa stayed longer than she planned. Neither of them wanted to leave. It felt like meeting someone you didn't expect, but somehow had been waiting for. There was a small moment that told the whole story before either of them realized it. Johnny reached into his pocket for a lighter, and his hand shook slightly. Vanessa saw it. She didn't say anything. She just held her gaze steady on him, as if to say she wouldn't judge whatever caused it. He noticed her noticing. That quiet acknowledgement hit him harder than any applause he had ever received. They parted late that night, but the distance between them didn't return. Johnny turned back to look at her before he left. Vanessa smiled, the kind of smile she rarely gave strangers. It was soft, almost private. Something passed between them that didn't need words. From that moment, other people faded. Schedules didn't matter. Miles didn't matter. They kept finding each other in different cities, different rooms, different moments. Nothing about it was planned. Everything about it felt inevitable. The world saw a romance. They felt a connection they didn't yet understand. They didn't know it then, but that quiet night in Paris would change the course of their lives. The calm woman who built walls of silence met the man who lived in constant noise. And that contrast, so beautiful at first, would become the fault line that shaped everything after. The early years felt warm, steady, and strangely quiet for two people who lived under constant attention. Vanessa and Johnny slipped into a rhythm that looked effortless from the outside. They spent long mornings in Paris cafes, hidden behind sunglasses, sharing small jokes that didn't need explanations. It was the kind of peace Johnny had not felt in years. It was the kind of intimacy Vanessa rarely allowed anyone to see. Work didn't separate them. They found ways to stay close even when cities changed. Johnny sent her messages from film sets at dawn. Vanessa left him handwritten notes before flights. They built a private world with simple rituals, late-night music, quiet dinners, long drives where neither of them spoke for hours. Silence became their language, and for a while, it was enough. The industry noticed the difference in him. Friends said he laughed more. Assistants said he argued less. Even directors said he looked calmer on camera. Johnny didn't credit himself for the change. He always pointed to her. Vanessa grounded him. She moved through life with a softness that steadied the chaos in him. He admired that. He leaned on it more than he admitted. For Vanessa, those years were a kind of unexpected freedom. She felt seen without being exposed. She felt protected without being controlled. Johnny had a way of looking at her as if she was both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. He encouraged her music, he protected her privacy, he treated her silence like a strength, not a flaw. For a woman who had grown up under the weight of public judgment, that meant everything. Their home life was simple. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations. Just two people sharing space, in a way that made the outside world feel far away. They cooked together. They watched old films on rainy nights. They played music in the living room until dawn. Johnny sometimes read scripts out loud. Vanessa listened with her head resting against the couch. Those moments formed the foundation of what everyone later called a perfect love. But perfection is never perfect. Even in the golden years, small cracks appeared. Johnny had days when he withdrew into himself, days when he lost his temper over something minor, days when he disappeared into long silences that didn't match the gentleness he showed her. Vanessa felt them, but she didn't confront them. She believed time would smooth the edges. She was wrong, but she didn't know it yet. For now, she focused on the light. She watched him hold their newborn daughter with shaking hands. She watched him calm their son when he cried. She watched him try harder than he ever had in his life. Johnny tried to be everything he had never been for anyone else, and for a while, he succeeded. The world admired them. The press called them a perfect balance. Fans said they were meant to be. Photographs of them walking through airports became symbols of a rare Hollywood stability. It was the kind of story the public wanted to believe. Beauty, talent, family, peace. A couple, seemingly untouched by the storms of fame. Vanessa knew better. She saw the storms forming far earlier than others. She noticed the way Johnny fidgeted when life got too quiet. She noticed the restless energy under his skin. She noticed the shadows in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. She knew those shadows had nothing to do with her. But she also knew enough about love to understand that shadows don't stay hidden forever. Still, she held on, because the golden beginning was real. It was not a performance. It was not a fantasy. It was two people trying their best in a world that rarely allowed sincerity to survive. And for a long time, that effort held them together. They didn't know it yet, but the light they built would make the darkness ahead even harder to face. The darkness didn't arrive in one moment. It crept in quietly. It moved slowly at first, then faster, until it filled the spaces that used to feel safe. Johnny changed in ways that were hard to explain. His energy shifted, his temper rose faster. His silence grew heavier. Vanessa felt it before she understood it. She felt it in the way he walked through the house, in the way he avoided her eyes, in the way he stayed awake long after everyone was asleep. Work made things worse. Pressure followed him everywhere. Studio demands, tabloid stories, personal battles he never talked about. Johnny didn't collapse all at once. He unraveled, piece by piece. Vanessa watched it happen. She tried to steady him. She tried to keep the house calm. She tried to be the quiet anchor she had always been. But the anchor was slipping. He started disappearing for hours, without warning. Sometimes for days. He said he needed space. He said he needed time. He said he was tired. His words never matched his actions. Vanessa waited in silence, pretending it didn't scare her. She told herself he would come back the way he used to. But every return felt shorter. Every departure felt longer. The warmth between them faded. Not suddenly. Slowly, like a light dimming, even when the switch is still on. Johnny became unpredictable. One night, he was gentle. The next night, he was distant. Vanessa tried to read his moods. She tried to avoid the triggers she didn't understand. She learned to speak less, to move carefully, to measure every word. She loved him, but she feared the version of him that kept showing up. The children noticed. They were too young to name it, but old enough to feel it. Vanessa tried to hide the tension. She tried to make the house feel normal, but children always know when something is wrong. They know when silence is no longer peace. They know when footsteps sound different. Johnny wasn't cruel. That was the hardest part. Cruelty would have given her clarity. Instead, he was lost. Trapped in patterns he couldn't break, haunted by things he refused to admit. Vanessa saw the man she loved slipping behind a fog she couldn't enter. She called his name, but he didn't hear it the same way anymore. His drinking increased. His absences grew longer. His promises became softer and less real. He apologized often, but his apologies didn't change anything. They were temporary bandages for wounds he never treated. Vanessa accepted them because she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the golden years could return if she stayed patient. But patience has limits. And love has boundaries, even when people pretend it doesn't. The tension between them built quietly. It grew in the small moments. The way he avoided breakfast, the way he shut the door too quickly, the way he laughed at things that weren't funny. Vanessa felt like she was living with two versions of the same man. One who adored her, and one who didn't see her at all. There were nights when she sat alone in the living room, listening for the sound of his car. She hated herself for waiting. She hated herself for hoping. She hated how familiar the emptiness felt. Fame had taught her how to survive silence, but this silence was different. This silence hurt. The world never saw it. They saw photographs of them holding hands. They saw red carpet smiles. They saw a family that looked perfect. Vanessa learned to protect the illusion. She learned to hold the children close while the cameras flashed. She learned to hide the fatigue beneath makeup and composure. She learned to pretend the darkness wasn't growing. But the darkness didn't care about pretending. It grew until it filled the house. It grew until she couldn't sleep. It grew until she felt like a ghost in her own life. She didn't cry often. Crying would have broken the control she needed to stay upright. Instead, she carried the weight quietly, the way she carried everything. The simplest sentence describes the truth better than anything else. Johnny disappeared even when he was standing right beside her. That was the moment she understood what real loneliness felt like. The descent wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't look like a movie. It looked like love, fading under the pressure of a man fighting himself. And no matter how hard she tried, Vanessa could not save a man who didn't know how to stop falling. The breaking point arrived quietly. It didn't come with a fight. It didn't come with shouting. It came with a silence so heavy that Vanessa felt it before she heard it. The house was cold that night. The kind of cold that doesn't come from weather, but from distance. Johnny walked in late. His steps were slow. His eyes were somewhere else. She knew that version of him too well. He didn't say much. He dropped his keys on the table. He sat down without looking at her. She asked if he was okay. He nodded, but the nod was hollow. It was the kind of answer that ends a conversation before it begins. Vanessa watched him from across the room. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the disconnect. She saw a man who no longer recognized the life he built. She tried to reach him one more time. She sat beside him. She placed a hand on his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't respond. He stared ahead, lost in a place she couldn't follow. And then he said the sentence she had feared for months. Soft, almost gentle, but final. I don't know who I am anymore. It wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was surrender. A surrender she couldn't fix. A surrender that told her he had already left long before he spoke the words. Vanessa felt something inside her shift. A quiet click, like a door closing from the inside. She didn't cry. She stood up slowly. She walked to the bedroom. She packed a small bag, only the essentials. She moved carefully, as if any sudden gesture might break the fragile silence holding the night together. She didn't look back at him. She didn't need to. She already knew this was the end of the version of them she had been trying to save. The hallway felt longer than usual. The air felt heavier. The floor felt colder. She walked through the house like she was leaving a memory instead of a home. When she reached the front door, she paused. Not to reconsider, but to breathe. One deep breath, the kind you take when stepping into a different life. She opened the door. The night air hit her face. It felt cleaner than the air inside. It felt honest. She stepped out without hesitation. She didn't close the door loudly. She let it fall shut behind her with a soft sound. A sound that marked the end of something that once felt unbreakable. From that night on, nothing was ever the same. The revelation came years later, long after the house was quiet and the headlines had moved on. Vanessa never rushed to speak. She waited until the noise around their past softened. When she finally talked, her voice was calm, steady, and free of bitterness. It was the tone of someone who had survived something quietly. The interview wasn't dramatic. No bright lights, no staged emotions, just a simple conversation in a quiet room. The journalist asked about the years she shared with Johnny. Vanessa paused. She looked down for a moment, then lifted her head with a clarity she had never shown publicly. She said, the first sentence, without decoration. He was the best man I ever loved, and the loneliest. The room fell silent. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't praise. It was truth. A truth she had carried alone for years. She continued, still calm, still controlled. You can love someone deeply and still lose them. Not because you stop loving, but because they stop seeing themselves. Another sentence cut even deeper. Some people drown quietly. You don't hear the water until it's over. She wasn't talking about fame. She wasn't talking about chaos. She was talking about the slow, invisible collapse she witnessed. The collapse she couldn't stop. For the first time, she admitted how helpless she felt. I tried to hold the light for both of us, but you can't save someone who believes the darkness belongs to them. The journalist didn't interrupt. Vanessa didn't cry. She didn't shift in her seat. She spoke like someone recounting a memory she had already made peace with. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of a story the world thought it understood. Public reaction was immediate. People called her brave. Others called her cold. But most saw what they had missed earlier. Her silence had never been indifference. It had been protection. For him, for their children, for herself. She didn't share details. She didn't reveal secrets. She only offered truth in its simplest form. And in that moment, Vanessa Paradis took back the one thing she had lost in the noise of their story, her voice. The years after the breakup were quiet, almost unusually quiet for someone who had lived under a spotlight for so long. Vanessa didn't search for a new story to replace the old one. She built a smaller life instead. A slower one. A life that didn't depend on holding anyone together. Her mornings became softer. Her music returned. Her home felt lighter. The silence that once hurt her became the silence that healed her. She focused on her children. She focused on work that felt honest. She chose projects that matched her voice instead of her image. She learned to enjoy days without cameras, without pressure, without the weight of someone else's struggle shaping her steps. But for the first time in years, she belonged fully to herself. People asked if she missed the past. She never answered directly. She didn't need to. The peace in her posture told the real story. Vanessa understood that loving someone and leaving someone could both be acts of strength. She understood that survival sometimes looks like walking away quietly. Her rebirth wasn't dramatic. It was steady, calm, clear, and in that clarity, she discovered the simplest truth of all. Some lives begin again the moment you stop trying to save what was already gone.